In Johannesburg, South Africa, 28-year-old Lindayo Masiko sat in the second row of a packed conference hall, her heart beating faster than usual. This was supposed to be the biggest day of her life. For 3 long years she had worked late nights, skipped weekends, and poured everything she had into building this tech platform. Today was the launch. Her hands were slightly shaking as she looked at the stage, waiting for her name to be called. But then, something felt off. Her older sister, Thando Masiko, confidently walked onto the stage instead. Lindayo frowned, confused at first. Maybe Thando was just introducing the project. But then Thando smiled at the crowd and said, "This project has been my vision for the past 3 years." Lindayo froze. Her chest tightened as the presentation began. Slide after slide appeared on the big screen. Her ideas, her designs, her code. Every detail she had worked so hard on, being claimed by someone else. By her own sister. The audience erupted in applause. Investors nodded in approval. Cameras flashed as people stood up, impressed by Thando's brilliance. And Lindayo just sat there, silent, her fingers curled into her palms as her eyes filled with disbelief. She wanted to stand up, to say something, to shout the truth, but fear held her back. This wasn't new. Thando had always been the confident one, the one people listened to. Lindayo had always stayed in the background, doing the work no one saw. But this time it felt different. As the applause echoed louder and louder, one thought burned deep inside her. This wasn't over. Growing up in Pretoria, Lindayo had always lived in her sister's shadow. It didn't matter how hard she tried. Somehow Thando was always the one everyone noticed. At family gatherings, relatives would smile at Thando, praising her confidence and the way she spoke. "She's a natural leader," they would say. Meanwhile, Lindayo would be sitting quietly in the corner, barely getting a second glance. Their parents weren't cruel, but they were clear about their favorite. Thando was the one they showed off. He spoke, everyone listened. If she did something small, it was celebrated like a big achievement. And Lindayo? Even when she did something big, it was treated like it was nothing special. In school, Lindayo worked twice as hard. She stayed up late studying, finishing assignments, building projects. Her grades were always top tier. Teachers respected her. But at home, the attention still went to Thando. Because she knew how to talk, how to impress, how to shine in front of people. Over time, Lindayo started noticing a pattern. Whenever she created something, Thando somehow stepped in and took control of how it was presented. If Lindayo built a project, Thando would be the one explaining it to others. If Lindayo had an idea, Thando would repeat it louder. And suddenly it sounded like it came from her. And people believed it. At first, Lindayo told herself it didn't matter. She thought, as long as the work is good, it's fine. She stayed quiet, kept her head down and continued building. But deep inside it hurt. Because no matter how much she achieved, it never felt like it was truly hers. It was like she was invisible, while her sister stood in the spotlight she had quietly built. And the worst part? No one seemed to notice the difference. When Lindayo joined the company a few years earlier, she didn't come in loud or trying to impress anyone. She came in focused. From day one, she kept her head down and let her work speak for itself. She was the kind of person who stayed late without being asked. While others left the office, she would still be there, fixing problems, improving systems and making things run smoother. Slowly, she became the backbone of the team, even if no one said it out loud. She built the core structure of projects, created smart strategies that saved the company money, and handled clients in a calm, professional way. When something went wrong, people quietly turned to Lindayo to fix it. And she always did. But she didn't talk about it. She didn't post about it, didn't brag, didn't try to stand in front of the room and take credit. That just wasn't who she was. And that's where Thando stepped in. Thando joined later, but she knew exactly how to get attention. She spoke confidently, dressed sharply, and always volunteered to present in meetings. Whenever there was a big client or an important event, Thando was the one on stage explaining the work. At first, Lindayo didn't think much of it. She told herself, "It's okay. I prefer working behind the scenes anyway." But slowly something started to change. People began connecting the success of the projects to Thando's name. When clients praised the work, they praised her. When managers talked about results, they mentioned her. Even ideas that Lindayo had spent weeks building were suddenly being described as Thando's vision. And Lindayo was barely mentioned. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow, almost invisible. A meeting here, a presentation there. A moment where Lindayo stayed quiet, and Thando spoke up. Until one day it became normal. Normal for Thando to take the spotlight. Normal for Lindayo to stay in the background. And without realizing it, the work Lin Dai had built with her own hands started carrying someone else's name. After the launch event ended, the hall slowly emptied, but Lin Dai couldn't move. Her mind was still stuck on that moment. Her sister on stage smiling, taking credit for everything she had built. Her chest felt tight, but this time, she didn't stay silent. She stood up, took a deep breath, and went looking for Thando. She found her backstage, surrounded by a few colleagues, laughing like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just taken 3 years of someone else's life and called it her own. "Thando, we need to talk," Lin Dai said, her voice shaking but firm. Thando glanced at her, slightly annoyed, then stepped aside. "What is it?" Lin Dai looked straight at her. "That project, it's mine." "Why would you do that?" For a second there was silence. Then Thando let out a small laugh. "Relax, Lin Dai," she said casually. "You're overreacting." Lin Dai felt her heart drop. "Overreacting? You stood on that stage and told everyone it was your work." Thando crossed her arms, her expression turning cold. "And you wouldn't even know how to present it. I made it successful." Those words hit harder than anything else. It wasn't just that Thando took the credit. It was how easily she dismissed her. Like her work didn't matter. Like she didn't matter. Lin Dai stood there speechless. Years of late nights, stress, and effort, reduced to nothing in a single sentence. Something inside her cracked in that moment. All those years of staying quiet, of letting things slide, of convincing herself it wasn't a big deal. It all came rushing back at once. But this time it didn't just hurt, change something. Her eyes slowly hardened as she looked at Thando. For the first time she didn't feel small. She didn't feel like stepping back. She felt angry. Not loud anger. Not emotional shouting. A calm, dangerous kind of anger. The kind that doesn't fade away. Thando walked off like the conversation meant nothing. Like she had already won. But Lin Dai didn't follow her. She stood there, silent again. But this silence was different. Because this time she wasn't staying quiet out of fear. She was thinking. And one thing became very clear in her mind. She was done being invisible. After the confrontation, Lin Dai went back to her office, her hands still trembling. At first she felt empty. Like all her hard work had been stolen and there was nothing she could do about it. But as she sat down and opened her laptop, something caught her eye. She remembered the folder she had kept. Every email, every project file, every version of the code she had written. For years she had meticulously saved everything, not because she planned to prove herself, but because she liked being organized, keeping track of her work. And now, that careful habit suddenly felt like a lifeline. She started scrolling through her old emails. There it was. Conversations with clients, managers, and teammates, all discussing her ideas as if they were brilliant. There were project files with her name in the timestamps, showing exactly when she had created each part of the platform. Drafts, proposals, strategy documents. Everything pointed to her as the real creator. Even internal communications were a goldmine. Messages between Thando and the marketing team casually referring to her work, unaware that Lin Dai had proof of every step. It wasn't just a few scattered pieces. There was a clear trail, a map showing who did what and when. Lin Dai leaned back in her chair, realizing the truth. She had all the evidence she needed. Every late night, every sacrifice, every sleepless weekend had left a trace. And now, those traces could speak louder than Thando ever could. She hadn't intended to use it like this. She was never the type to fight publicly, never wanted drama. But the injustice, the way Thando had stolen her work in front of everyone, changed everything. This evidence was more than just files and emails. It was her story, her truth. And for the first time Lin Dai felt a spark of power. She wasn't invisible anymore. The sister who had always worked quietly behind the scenes now held the ultimate weapon, proof that could not be ignored, twisted, or stolen. And deep down Lin Dai knew one thing for certain. When the world finally saw the truth, no one would be able to take her work away again. Just a few days after she discovered her hidden evidence, Lin Dai was at home, trying to focus on something else, when her phone started buzzing non-stop. Notifications kept popping up. Messages from friends, colleagues, even strangers. Everyone was sending the same link, all with the same shocked reactions. Curious and a little nervous, Lin Dai clicked it. Her heart skipped a beat. The link led to a public site where internal company documents had been posted online, leaked for the entire world to see. Screenshots, emails, project files, code logs. All of it clearly showing her name as the creator of the tech platform. Every part of the project that Thando had claimed as her own was now linked back to Lin Dai. He stared at the screen, stunned. How had this happened? She hadn't shared any of this with anyone. But whoever had done it, someone who knew the truth, had decided the world needed to see it. And just like that, everything changed. Within hours, the leak went viral. On social media, people were talking about it non-stop. Posts praising Lindai's work flooded timelines, while messages criticizing Thando's claim appeared everywhere. Screenshots of emails she had written, code she had developed, and project timelines were shared and reshared, sparking heated debates. Some even tagged news outlets, which quickly picked up the story. Lindai couldn't believe the speed at which it spread. Her quiet, behind-the-scenes work, her years of effort, was now being seen by thousands, maybe millions. For the first time, people were connecting her name to the brilliance of the project. Even colleagues at the company began messaging her privately, apologizing for overlooking her work before, expressing support and asking how they could help. Lindai felt a mix of relief, disbelief, and a strange thrill. The truth was out, and for the first time since the launch event, Lindai smiled. Not a small, quiet smile, but a confident one. The sister who had been silenced, overshadowed, and ignored was finally being seen. The leak had been unexpected, yes, but it was exactly what she needed. The truth was no longer just her secret weapon. Now it was public, undeniable, and unstoppable. For the first time, Lindai felt the power of her own work. And this time there was no way anyone could take it away. Within hours of the leak, the story exploded online. Social media feeds in South Africa were flooded with posts about Lindai and her stolen work. People couldn't believe what had happened. Many were outraged. How could someone take credit for another person's years of effort, especially a sister taking from her own sibling? Comments poured in from all over. "This is unbelievable," one person wrote. "Lindai deserves all the credit," said another. Memes, tweets, and status updates spread her story like wildfire. People shared screenshots of the emails, code logs, and project files, pointing out that the proof was undeniable. Every new post seemed to add fuel to the fire. At the same time, criticism of Thando grew louder. People were shocked that she would claim someone else's work so openly, especially in front of a large audience of investors and colleagues. "How could she stand on stage and lie like that?" someone commented. Many questioned her integrity, her professionalism, and even her sense of family. News outlets quickly picked up the story. Headlines blared across websites and TV channels. "Corporate credit theft? Sister claims work not hers," and "the hidden creator behind the biggest tech launch in Johannesburg." Journalists reached out to both sisters, and the story quickly became the talk of the nation. Even within the business community, people began discussing it. Clients, investors, and colleagues started noticing the clear evidence that Lindai was the true mastermind. Thando's carefully built reputation based on public appearances and charm began to crack under the pressure. The same spotlight she had used to take credit was now exposing her. For Lindai, watching it unfold was surreal. She had spent years in silence, letting her work speak quietly behind the scenes. And now the world was finally seeing it and acknowledging her. People she had never met were cheering for her, supporting her, and calling out the injustice she had faced. It was a strange mix of relief and vindication. The sister who had once stolen her ideas, silenced her voice, and kept her in the shadows was now facing the consequences. The world had seen the truth, and for the first time, Lindai didn't feel invisible. The recognition, respect, and justice she had longed for were finally coming, and it was louder than she had ever imagined. The pressure kept building, and soon the company couldn't ignore the situation any longer. Headlines were everywhere, social media was exploding, and investors were asking questions. Finally, they called a public press conference to address the controversy. When the day came, the room was packed with journalists, cameras, and a buzzing crowd of employees. Thando stood at the front, trying to look calm, her usual confident smile plastered on her face. But there was tension in the air, and it showed. Questions from reporters immediately turned to her. "Can you explain why Lindai is listed as the true creator of the project in these documents?" one reporter asked, holding up printed copies of the leaked files. Thando hesitated. Her smile wavered. She tried to deflect, saying, I contributed as well," but the reporters pressed harder. "These emails, code logs, and timelines clearly show Lindai was responsible for the work. How do you respond?" Her voice grew shaky. She stumbled over her words, looking around for support. Colleagues avoided eye contact. The charm she had used for years couldn't cover the truth anymore. Every attempt to explain only made it worse. The audience could see she was under pressure, and that she didn't have a real answer. Then it was Lindai's turn. For the first time, she stepped up to the microphone. Her heart was racing, but she looked around the room with steady eyes. The energy was different now, not fear but determination. She began to speak. "I built this project," Lindy said clearly. "Every system, every line of code, every strategy. It was mine. I stayed behind the scenes for years because I thought the work mattered more than attention. But my sister took credit for it, and that wasn't fair." She went on to explain how she had developed the platform from scratch, showing proof of her work with screenshots and timestamps from the internal documents. The journalists listened intently, some taking notes, others nodding. The room was quiet, except for the occasional gasp when a key piece of evidence was revealed. By the end of her speech, Lindy's voice was calm but strong. She didn't shout, she didn't plead, she simply told the truth. And in that moment the room shifted. People weren't just hearing her story, they were believing it. Thando, who had once stolen the spotlight with ease, now stood in the shadow of Lindy's words. The quiet sister who had always worked behind the scenes was finally being seen, and no one could deny the truth anymore. A few days after the press conference, the company finally made an official statement. They confirmed what everyone online had already seen. Lindy Masiko was the true creator of the project. Every system, every strategy, every line of code, it was all hers. The announcement was clear, direct, and left no room for doubt. Lindy felt a rush of relief and pride as she read the statement. For years she had worked quietly, letting her efforts speak for themselves. And now the world was finally acknowledging her. The company also offered her a leadership position, putting her in charge of future projects and giving her the visibility she deserved. This wasn't just a job promotion. It was recognition, respect, and justice all in one. The response was immediate. Social media buzzed with congratulations and support. Clients, colleagues, and even competitors reached out to applaud her hard work and resilience. "You earned this," one message read. "Finally, the world can see what we've all known for years." Meanwhile, Thando's reputation began to crumble. The very image she had built over the years, of being a confident, brilliant leader, was falling apart. Investors questioned her integrity, colleagues whispered behind her back, and the public that had once cheered for her now criticized her actions. People started pointing out her pattern of taking credit for others' work, and it became clear that her success had been built on borrowed achievements. Despite the shock and betrayal, Lindy didn't gloat. She had never wanted this kind of drama. She only wanted her work to be recognized. But now, with her proof and the company's acknowledgement, she finally felt a sense of balance. Years of silence, frustration, and invisibility were replaced with respect, authority, and opportunity. For the first time, Lindy walked through the office knowing people were seeing her for who she truly was. The spotlight she had never sought was finally hers, and this time it was earned. She no longer had to work in the shadows or fear that someone else would take credit for her achievements. Her sister, once admired by so many, was now struggling under the weight of her own lies. And Lindy, the quiet builder, had finally stepped into the light, proving that truth, skill, and patience can overcome even the harshest betrayal. Months later, Lindy stood on a brightly lit stage, her heart steady and her mind focused. The crowd waited, eager to see the next big innovation from the company, and this time there was no confusion. Her name was on every slide, her achievements highlighted in every presentation. As she began speaking, she felt a rush of confidence she had never known before. Gone was the fear of being in the spotlight, the anxiety of someone else claiming her work. Every word, every idea she shared was hers, and everyone in the room could see it. She explained the project clearly, pointing out the strategies, systems, and innovations she had created. The audience listened intently, captivated not just by the project, but by her presence, her authority, and her voice. For years she had been the quiet one, the sister working behind the scenes while Thando took the credit. She had stayed silent, hoping her work would speak for itself. And it did. But it had taken struggle, betrayal, and persistence for the world to finally listen. Now, as applause filled the room, Lindy realized something powerful. The voice she had hidden, the talent she had kept private, had finally been heard. She no longer needed to shrink herself or step aside. She had earned her place in the spotlight, and it felt right. Looking out at the audience, she smiled. The sister who once stayed silent had finally found her voice. The truth she had built quietly, patiently, and with unwavering dedication had become louder than any lie. And for Lindy, that was more than recognition. It was freedom, respect, and the promise that from now on her work, her ideas, and her voice would never be ignored again.